Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to talk about something a little different for me, and that is snowblowers. I've recently been working on two snowblowers that are owned by the same party. I normally don't work on snowblowers much anymore, except my own two machines. But these blowers are a little bit of exceptional circumstances, so I brought them into my shop. The first one just needed a good fuel system cleaning. It had been parked, I'm going to guess 3 or 4 years ago, and hasn't been used since. And that's actually the same with both of these machines. I think they've been sitting around 3 or 4 years. First one just cleaned the fuel system, drained and flushed the fuel tank, put fresh fuel in it, new carb float bowl gasket, put it back together, and it's running fine. In fact, it's already back at the party that owns it. The second blower, which is very similar to the first, they're both Craftsman blowers, by the way, made by MPD. They're two-stage blowers. I'm not sure the horsepower. I'm going to guess around 8 or so. The first one it was a little bit later model, around a 2018, as far as I can tell from the model and serial number. The second one, which is going to really be more the focus of this video, is an earlier model. Again, as best I can determine, it's about a 2008. It's in a little rougher shape than the first one I worked on. This one had not only the fuel system needed to be flushed and cleaned like the first one, but there's an issue with the 120 volt electric starter. That's the type of system you plug into house current with an extension cord. The little starter motor spins the engine over, etc. That is what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, I originally wasn't intending to shoot any video on this project for these projects, but as I got into the starter and realized what I think is going on, which I'll talk about in detail as we get into it, I thought some folks might be interested in what I discovered regarding this particular machine, and so that's why I'm sharing it with you. So this video that coming up here that you're going to see in just a moment, these clips, there was not a lot of thought put into putting them together, getting them together. I basically just kind of shot the video as I went. There's not a lot of assembly involved, but I do talk through the situation I encountered and the solution I eventually got to. So let's get on the model number. I believe this is around a 2008 model year, which would make it 14 or so years old. It has not been terribly well taken care of. It did have, or does have, a fuel system problem. That is, it was just stored and it wasn't drained. It had almost a full tank of gas, which smelled terrible, so I drained that. I did clean the fuel system and got the carburetor all back together. It was all gummed up as one would expect from varnish, new fuel lines, flushed the fuel tank. I think the fuel system is ready to go. The other, which is a more concerning issue, is the electric starter. I'm in handheld mode right here, so you have to forgive any shakiness of the camera, but I had to get down in here where you could see where the mounting bosses are for the starter. You can see one of them right here. This is the lower one. This is the one I think is the problem, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then the upper one here. Now this starter, let me just pull this off for you here. You can see the back side of the starter, and you can see the mounting bosses here and here, and those are threaded into the block. And those are just dowel pins here and there at the top just to locate it. And then you have this bracket or plate, which I actually did have to push back and bend back to the left because it actually was sitting like, more like, I'm exaggerating, more like this. So I bent it back to allow access to this lower mounting boss and threaded hole. I'll show you a picture of what it looked like originally. The block has been relieved. You can see right here, been machined for the starter to mount up against the block. And I think what happened is when this was assembled in a factory, they didn't get the lower mount tight against the block, and it had a little bit of a gap, so the starter was sitting in an angle. The bottom wasn't engaged fully, and it was not allowing the pinion on the starter motor to fully engage with the ring gear, which you can see right here. And you might be able to see a little bit of wear here just on the edge of these teeth I'm pointing to, which matches the starter motor right there. And again, this spins free, like you can see here, and does engage. And when I apply a 120 volt current to it, it spins freely, and it does extend and then retract. But you can see a little bit of wear here and corresponding wear there. And again, my theory is this bottom had about a, oh, I'm going to say 4 or 5 millimeter gap, something like that. And it just wasn't sitting tight against the block. In other words, it was sitting at an angle and wasn't engaging. So what I'm going to do now, put the starter back in place, see if I can't give you a shot of what I think happens or happened when the starter was originally mounted at the factory. I've got the starter mounted. I've got the top bolt in place. It's not really tight. It's just snug to pull the starter up. I intentionally didn't pull the bottom one in here because I want to show you what I think is going on. We're looking at the bottom mount for the starter. This is where the 6 millimeter bolt goes through and into the block. This is what I think is the problem. Before I go ahead and fit this back together, I wanted to point out, you can see where I'm pointing to with my left index finger, that groove, that half moon shaped groove right there in that boss. I believe that is caused by the dowel pin right there not being seated in the hole right here like it's supposed to be to provide alignment. And I think that dowel pin rested against that boss right there, that machine section, and was pulled down tight at the factory, thereby not allowing this bottom piece right here, bottom part of the mounting, to pull tight against the block. So I'm going to go ahead now and see if I can't put this back together the way I think it's supposed to be. So I guess my theory was correct. Everything's all mounted back in place. Have to button up a few things such as remounting the switch, etc. But everything is back together in terms of the mounting of the starter motor. This will be the first start. I just wheeled it out, put fuel in it, check for fuel leaks, make sure there was nothing leaking. You can see I got the extension cord plugged in, and let's see if she'll start. On the second of the two blowers, the starter motor, it wasn't mounted correctly to begin with. I don't think at the factory. One thing I did do that I didn't talk about, I don't think in the video, was I opened up the relief in the starter mounting boss where that dowel pin in the block fits over. I opened that up just a little bit to make it a little easier fit, so it just bolted right up flush to the block, as you could see in the video, and I think that's addressed our issues. Now, those engines are, both those engines on both the blowers are MTD supplied engines. MTD is the manufacturer, the OEM manufacturer of the blowers themselves. Been around for many, many years. Those are Chinese made engines that MTD sources from China. I think the trade name is Powermore, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not very familiar with those engines. I've never worked on them before. That was my first experience. I wasn't, to be frank about it, I wasn't overly impressed with them. I think that the fit and finish of the engines was nowhere near what I've encountered when working on like Honda's, Kawasaki, industrial commercial type engines, lawn equipment, or even Briggs & Stratton for that matter. I just wasn't impressed. If I was to buy a new snowblower today, and I have the same snowblower I have owned since 1984, I bought it new, it's a Toro with a Tecumseh engine on it. Still running fine. I have never had to do any major work to it, and that's what, 38 years old. Still works. Use it every winter. I have taken care of it. It's always been stored inside. I wash it down every spring, make sure there's no salt or debris on it. Go over it thoroughly every spring, change the oil when necessary. I always change my oil in the spring, not in the fall, by the way. And if I was to buy a new blower today, I would buy either a Toro, an Aaron's, let's see what other brands would be out there. Those would probably be the two I would look at first, or Honda. Toro, Aaron's, or Honda would be the three brands that I would look at for a snowblower. The lower tier brands, and again, what I have worked on in the past, historically haven't impressed me. I did have to replace the float bowl gaskets in both of these engines. They use an identical gasket right there, and that's the part I got. Again, two of them. Those were pretty easily obtained. I just ordered them online. I didn't try to get them from any local dealers because all my local dealers sell major brands like Honda, Toro, etc. So Aaron's. So I didn't even bother with them. They would have had to probably order them anyway. So pretty easily obtained. I think I paid $8 or $9 for those gaskets, and that did assist me in rebuilding the fuel system and flushing it out. Anyway, long story short, that's my experience with the starter motor on the second of the two blowers. It's already been now returned as I'm shooting this wrap up. It's been returned to the owner, and I don't know what they're going to do with it. Eventually they might get rid of it and keep the first machine I worked on because that was the nicer of the two machines. That's going to be it for this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.